Welcome again, everyone. My name is Mike Gallagher, and I'm the host for today's session. And I've done two of them this morning, so we got some of the bugs out, and today is going to go smoothly. Glad you could join us. As if you've been to a couple of these already, you'll notice that we ask that you turn your video and your mute off, and that helps to let the screens change and makes it clearer for us. And if you use a chat session at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, I think we're going to wait until the end of the session, about the last 15 minutes, and then we'll ask a bunch of questions of Ralph, and he'll have answers right off the tip of his tongue. Okay, so I'd like to welcome today Ralph Bednarz to talk on the subject volunteer monitoring on Michigan inland lakes and streams, the self-help CLMP MiCorps legacy. And Ralph is with us and is so familiar with this program, we could not have found anybody better to talk about the history of CLMP. He retired from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality in 2011 after a 35-year career in environmental protection and water resources management in Michigan. Ralph currently stays involved with protective lakes management programs in Michigan through the Michigan Inland Lakes Partnership, Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership, the Michigan Waterfront Alliance, and Michigan NELMS. Ralph is also working to protect Michigan's inland lakes in the Traverse City area, one lake, one shoreline at a time, by assisting and educating local units of government and lake associations on protective inland lakes management. We're thrilled to have you with us today, Ralph, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mike, for that kind introduction. You know, I wore a lot of hats in my 35+ year career with the DNR and DEQ, but I have to put this one back on today. Many of you out there will remember the lakes guy that came out to visit you on your lake and do side-by-side sampling in the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program. And this was one of my favorite and certainly one of my most rewarding hats to wear. The presentation I'm going to give today is about 35 or so minutes long. It's kind of a narrative presentation. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. But given that I live on a lake now in a kind of remote area out of Traverse City, I'm going to turn my video off, and then I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully it'll all work. So here we go. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, sir, Ralph, I see it.
Okay.
I see lots of lots of slides. There you go.
How are we doing? That looks good?
Yes, sir, it does.
All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Melissa and Mike and the entire MLSA SECCHI conference organizers for asking me to present this important perspective on the history of Michigan's citizen volunteer monitoring legacy. And I want to thank all of you out there in virtual space for attending. I also want to acknowledge the presentation co-authors. These are some of the past and present champions of Michigan's citizen volunteer monitoring legacy, and there are many more who I'll try to recognize as we continue. From an overview perspective, this presentation was developed as a historical timeline of the major milestones of Michigan's citizen volunteer monitoring legacy. First, we'll set the stage with the environmental movement of the 1960s, then talk about Michigan's self-help monitoring program beginning and early years in the 1970s. Then the self-help monitoring program challenges of the 1980s, followed by the advanced self-help program and the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program, the CLMP, in the 1990s, the CLMP expansion and the Michigan Clean Water Corps, or MiCorps, collaboration in the 2000s, followed by the Michigan MiCorps expansion during 2010s, and finally MiCorps today. The 60s was a decade of environmental turmoil. In 1962, Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring was published, which helped to inspire an environmental movement in this country. The late 60s were marked with major environmental crises, with the pollution and burning of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland being the poster child for environmental change and protection. The National Environmental Protection Act was promulgated in 1969. The first Earth Day, championed by Senator Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin, was held on April 22nd, 1970, 50 years ago last week. And the Environmental Protection Agency was formed by the Nixon administration in late 1970. This was followed by the enacting the nation's major environmental laws during the 70s, including the Clean Water Act in 1972. The new EPA, under the directorship of Bill Ruckelshaus, and the Clean Water Act regulation launched the first National Lake Survey, the National Eutrophication Survey in 1972. This survey focused on nutrient enrichment and eutrophication in lakes that received wastewater treatment plant discharges. 812 of the nation's lakes and reservoirs were sampled, including several in Michigan. With federal funding, the Michigan DNR also began systematically surveying and classifying Michigan's inland lakes. Baseline water quality and trophic condition were measured for 656 inland lakes over a 10-year period. Focus was on public access lakes greater than or equal to 50 acres in size. This range includes about 2,000 lakes, or approximately 30% of Michigan inland lakes, just a fraction of Michigan's 11,000 inland lakes. Citizen volunteer water monitoring programs also started to appear in the late 60s and early 70s. The first national program was the Isaac Walton Save Our Stream program. The state of Maine Lakes Environmental Association started a limited volunteer lakes monitoring program in 1970 that was expanded to statewide in 1974. The first statewide citizen volunteer lakes monitoring program began in 1973 in Minnesota. This was followed by Michigan's self-help lake monitoring program in 1974 and several others in the late 70s. Michigan's self-help volunteer monitoring program was created in 1974 to expand the DNR's lake classification effort using citizen volunteers. Dr. Dennis Tierney, a recent MSU grad, directed the effort and signed a task to Howard Wandell, another MSU grad and a DNR student assistant at the time. Laboratory support was provided by the University of Michigan Biological Station Stockard Lakeside Laboratory. Another DNR student assistant, Remy Patton, was assigned to the lab to assist with sample preparation and analysis. Dick Mikula, Al Massey, and others were involved with the self-help program during the years and beyond. The initial parameters in the self-help program included the trophic state indicators, SECCHI disc transparency, and chlorophyll A. Water clarity was measured using a SECCHI disc, and this measurement was also used to determine the photic zone of the water column where the chlorophyll sampling. The self-help program volunteers were provided instructions on how to construct a SECCHI disc and water column sampler, as well as instructions on sampling and submitting the samples. The SECCHI disc was constructed as an 8-inch weighted disc painted black and white in alternate quadrants and attached to a measured line. The chlorophyll sampler was a weighted can that held an uncapped plastic bottle and also was attached to a measured line. The original self-help program method for sampling chlorophyll A was collecting a depth integrated water column sample to a depth of twice the SECCHI depth using the weighted bottle sampler. The sample was stabilized with magnesium carbonate and shipped to the U of M Biological Station lab. At the lab, the samples were filtered, the filters with algae cells were dissolved, and chlorophyll A measured via fluorometric analysis by Remy Patton under the direction of Dr. John Ganley. The initial year in 1974 had 47 lakes participating. Enrollment in the self-help program grew to 145 lakes in SECCHI disc transparency and 90 lakes in chlorophyll A by 1974. The self-help program continued to grow under the direction of Howard Wandel and other staff in the DNR Inland Lakes Management Unit. The major adjustments at this time was the DNR Environmental Services Lab was now processing and analyzing the chlorophyll A samples. Another adjustment occurred in the late 70s with chlorophyll A sample handling. The samples are frozen and held until the end of the summer, then delivered to the lab in batch. This was done to streamline the process as well as concerns about sample holding times during sample shipment. The self-help program continued to grow with 261 lakes enrolled in SECCHI disc transparency and 200 lakes enrolled in chlorophyll in 1982. Dr. Robert CARLSON published his Trophic State Index TSI work in 1977, in which he used algal biomass as the basis for trophic state classification and incorporates three variables, chlorophyll, SECCHI depth, and total phosphorus, to independently estimate algal biomass. The three index variables were interrelated by linear regression models. And Michigan incorporated the CARLSON TSI continuum concept for classified lakes in 1983 for all of its inland lake water quality assessment programs, including the self-help program. Although the self-help program was growing in the early 1980s, the economic recession at that time would soon impact data collection and monitoring programs in Michigan across the country. Chlorophyll A was dropped from the program in 1983 due to budget constraints and also data quality and variability concerns. Self-help program and lab staff determined that freezing the chlorophyll samples was not an appropriate sample storage preservation technique. So all the original chlorophyll data was suspect and not retained. But the SECCHI disc transparency continued, but enrollment began to drop over the next 10 years down to just 116 lakes enrolled by 1991. With the cut in water quality monitoring funding, the DNR made a very important decision to continue the self-help program by creating a cooperative agreement with Michigan Lakes and Streams Association in 1992 to run the administrative aspects of the program. This agreement allowed for MLSA to retain the self-help program parameter enrollment fees and assist the DNR with self-help program enrollment, sample instructions and data forms, compiling annual data records, and distributing annual reports. These people shown here were the MLSA champions at the time that helped form the DNR MLSA cooperative. Mr. Riparian, Don Winnie, the former MLSA executive director and riparian editor, and the Lady of the Lakes, Pearl Bonell, former MLSA director of operations, Mr. Self-Help program volunteer, Ralph Vogel, an original self-help CLMP volunteer, and MLSA SECCHI disc engineer, and of course, Gene Roth, long-term MLSA supplies and equipment coordinator and data input support. With the DNR MLSA cooperative in place, we started to expand and enhance the self-help program, which was now called the Advanced Self-Help Program in 1993. A new parameter, spring total phosphorus, or TP, was added to the program. Replicate spring lake overturned samples were collected and frozen by the volunteers. The frozen samples were collected and delivered to the DNR Environmental Services Lab for analysis. 28 lakes, 32 basins were enrolled for the 1993 pilot year for spring total phosphorus, and enrollment increased over the next several years. We also added a very important quality assurance, quality control element to the program in 1993. These included replicate sample collection and analysis, as well as side-by-side sampling. We would go out on approximately 10% of the enrolled lakes and collect water samples using standard DNR methods alongside the volunteer methods and collection they did under the program. SECCHI DIS transparency measurements were continued in the advanced self-help program, and enrollment increased. In 1995, a significant organizational change occurred when the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ, was created under the EGLE administration as a separate department from the Department of Natural Resources. The water programs at that time were moved to the DEQ's Land and Water Management, Surface Water, Great Lakes, and Drinking Water divisions. The Advanced Self-Help Program continued to be administered in the Inland Lakes Management Unit, which was then part of the Land and Water Management Division. Howard Wandell directed this unit at that time, and I continued to manage the Advanced Self-Help Program cooperative with MLSA, and several Inland Lake staff were also involved in some aspects of the program. The next milestone started with the creation of the Clean Michigan Initiative Environmental Bond in 1998, which provided significant funding for water quality monitoring. This was critical to the continuation of the DEQ water monitoring programs, including the Advanced Self-Help Program. The CMI funding also allowed for the implementation of the DEQ surface water monitoring strategy, which was developed in 1997. This included the Inland Lake quality and eutrophication monitoring and volunteer monitoring components, which we developed. A partnership was created with USGS to implement the Lake Water Quality Assessment Monitoring Program. This was a 10-year project which reassessed baseline water quality and trophic status of Michigan's public lakes greater than or equal to 50 acres in size. We sampled a total of 729 lakes during spring overturn and late summer stratification for baseline water quality parameters and trophic status classification. This project also included a research component for predicting SECCHI DIS transparency utilizing satellite imagery, and I'll talk more about this a little bit later. With the CMI funding and the new water monitoring strategy, the Advanced Self-Help Program was enhanced and expanded into the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program, the CLMP, in 1998. We added a late summer total phosphorus parameter and reintroduced chlorophyll A as a pilot project. This provided data on all three parameters for the CARLSON TSI calculations and trophic classification for the lakes in the volunteer program. We also expanded the quality assurance, quality control element with replicate samples and side-by-side sampling for these new parameters. Given the uncertainty of the chlorophyll data collected during the initial years of the self-help program, we redesigned the sampling equipment and the sample handling and sample prep components of the procedure. The major change was creating cost-friendly filtering equipment and method for the volunteers to filter the samples on site within a couple hours of sampling. The DEPT integrated samples were collected and stabilized with magnesium carbonate as before, but the samples were filtered by the volunteers within 2 hours of collection using a 0.45 micron cellulose filter and a 50 milliliter syringe filtering device. The filtered disc with algae cells were kept in dark and frozen. The frozen filters were collected at the end of the summer sampling season delivered to the DEQ Environmental Services Lab, and the chlorophyll A measured by fluorometric analysis. This method and equipment continues to be used in the current CLMP. All parameters increased in participation under the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program. The SECCHI disk transparency enrollment increased to over 180 lakes, 230 basins. Spring and summer total phosphorus enrollment increased to 166 lakes during this time period. The new chlorophyll A pilot with 40 lakes enrolled was a great success, and enrollment increased to over 100 lakes during this time period. We added a dissolved oxygen temperature parameter to the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program in the year 2000. The first year pilot had 19 lakes enrolled. Bi-monthly measurements were collected using YSI, dissolved oxygen temperature meters, that were shared by the enrolled lakes. These graphs show spring and late summer dissolved oxygen temperature profiles measured in Corey Lake, St. Joseph County. Enrollment increased rapidly to over 50 lakes for this parameter, limited only by the number of meters we had available. We also expanded the quality assurance, quality control aspects of the program with side-by-side sampling for all the parameters, and a CLMP quality assurance project plan was written and approved in 2002. Here's an example of the CLMP data quality results. This graph compares 176 spring overturn total phosphorus results collected by the CLMP volunteers as compared to the professional side-by-side result. Statistically, there is over 90% agreement in these data. We also added pilot studies for rapid algae assessment, fish and age growth, and aquatic plants identification and mapping during the early 2000s. However, only the aquatic plants ID and mapping parameter has continued. Another milestone year for the CLMP was 2003, when then Governor Granholm issued Executive Order 2003-15, which created the Michigan Clean Water Corps as a comprehensive statewide volunteer water quality monitoring network. Rick Hoberla, my supervisor at that time, and I were assigned the task to design and manage MiCorps with the support of DEQ management and staff, and then EGLE staff to follow. We formed the MiCorps Steering Committee to direct its development, and the first contract was awarded to the Great Lakes Commission and its partners for the development and implementation of the MiCorps programs. The historical and recent past MiCorps support team members are listed here, but there are many more, even behind the scenes, individuals who supported the MiCorps program. And I'm sure you can recognize many of these names on the screen now. The MiCorps website and data exchange was developed and implemented early in the program. I'm sorry, let me back up one. The MiCorps network was developed by incorporating the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program and the Volunteer Stream Monitoring Grants Program under the MiCorps umbrella, and creating a new Volunteer Stream Cleanups Grant Program. We could do a separate presentation on each of these programs, but for today, I will continue to focus on the MiCorps CLMP. Now, the MiCorps website and data exchange was developed and implemented early in the program. The MiCorps CLMP continued with the 5 monitoring elements and added a new exotic aquatic plant watch parameter focusing on major invasive and nuisance aquatic plants such as Eurasian water milfoil and curly pondweed shown here. In 2008, the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program also has been involved with several research projects. The Satellite Remote Sensing Project, the USGS was developing under the Lake Water Quality Monitoring Program, utilized CLMP SECCHI disk transparency data collected by the volunteers at the same time as a satellite imagery was being collected for this project. This provided the critical ground truth data for this project. In 2008, volunteers on 77 CLMP enrolled lakes collected water samples for microcystin analysis and additional chlorophyll A samples for an MSU research project. And as we learned yesterday, the last parameter added to the CLMP program, the shore-to-shore lakeshore habitat assessment parameter, developed by Joe Lattimore and Paul Steen, was added to the CLMP in 2015. Volunteers observed the shoreline features in 1,000-foot sections and score the positive and negative factors of healthy shorelines. The scores are compiled into the littoral zone score, the riparian zone score, and erosion control score, and overall shore score is calculated for the lake. Average structural density, structures per 1,000 feet is also determined. The annual CLMP report was automated, and an individual lake reporting process was developed by Paul Steen, which provided a lake-specific customized data report for each enrolled lake starting in 2014. Here's an example of part of a lake-specific data report for Corey Lake, St. Joseph County. It lists the current results and graphically summarizes the long-term results for the trophic state indicators, as well as reports the current trophic conditions. And data for the other parameters that the lake may have been enrolled in are also included. I will close with several slides summarizing the remarkable data collection effort of the volunteers in the self-help, CLMP, MiCorps programs to date. For SECCHI Disc Transparency, 46 field seasons, starting from the beginning in 1974 through 2019. Over 115,000 total observations collected by the volunteers. Over 7,400 full sets of summer measurements, evenly spaced, from 830 plus lake basins. For total phosphorus for springtime, 27 field seasons from 1993 to 2019. Over 3,700 measurements from 400 plus lake basins, and over 2,000 observations of lake ice out from 380 plus lake basins. For summer total phosphorus, 22 field seasons from 1998 to 2019. Nearly 11,000, over 3,700 measurements from 400 plus lake basins. And for chlorophyll A, 22 field seasons from 1998 to 2019, nearly 11,000 individual measurements and over 2,200 full summer measurements from 190 plus lakes, basins. In 2019, trophic state classification was determined for 264 lakes enrolled in the CLMP. For dissolved oxygen and temperature, 20 field seasons from 2000 to 2019, with over 92,000 measurements and over 6,600 full dissolved oxygen temperature profiles across 156 plus lake basins. And for the aquatic plant identification and mapping parameter, 19 field seasons from 2001 to 2019, with 70 lakes completing full aquatic plant surveys. In the exotic aquatic plant watch, 11 field seasons from 2009 to 2019, 249 lakes completing surveys. And for the newest parameter, 5 field seasons in the shore-to-shore lakeshore habitat assessment from 2015 to 2019, and already 65 lakes completing shore-to-shore lakeshore habitat assessments. Over 1,000 lakeshore sections assessed. Unfortunately, a funding gap caused a pause in the MiCorps program in 2020, but the MiCorps partners supported a limited cooperative lakes monitoring program for SECCHI Disc Transparency and Exotic Plant Watch. We're not sure of the number of lakes that participated last year because the data has not been uploaded into the database, but I'm sure that it's over the hundreds. And as far as Exotic Plant Watch, 34 lakes have already submitted data for 2020, even without an official program in place. The good news is new funding has been secured and the MiCorps program is back in business in 2021. Also, new management at EGLE and a new contract with MSU and the former MiCorps partners are in place. This is the new MiCorps team, which was introduced at the virtual CLMP training yesterday. TAMARA LIPSEY is the new EGLE coordinator for MiCorps. Dr. Joe Lattimore coordinates and manages the new contract through MSU. Dr. Paul Steen from Huron River Watershed Council, Eric Elgin, Michigan State Extension, and the MLSA representatives, Melissa DeSimone, Mike Gallagher, and of course, Gene Roth. Also, I'd like to point out the MSU support team that Joe has put together to help with the expansion of the program, and especially with the database and the use of the database. With that, I'd like to thank all the self-help CLMP MiCorps volunteers. I also want to especially thank all the volunteers that agreed to test the new parameters as we introduced them throughout the years, and all the volunteers that participated in the quality assurance, quality control side-by-side sampling over years, even in spring phosphorus when sometimes the snow is flying sideways. And with that, I'll turn this back to you, Mike, for the questions. And I know we probably have plenty of time. So if there's more questions about the new CLMP, maybe we can open it up to some of the new MiCorps team, and they can also chime in.
Ralph, thanks so much. Learned a lot from that presentation. Didn't realize how in-depth it went and how many volunteers were involved and how much data they got. I think you had a good idea about calling on the people from the MiCorps team to possibly answer some questions, and I think they can unmute themselves if they need to. One question was, when can the 2020 data go into the database? And I think there was an answer to that one too.
I'm sure Joe Lattimore has been on top of a lot of these questions.
Oh yeah, yeah. Joe, can you hear us, and are you able to unmute and answer that one?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I responded in the text chat, but also will mention soon. We wanted to make sure we got the new enrollment system set up on the MiCorps website first. That was more important because we know everybody's got their SECCHI data from last year and it's safe and sound. So hold on to it. And very soon we will have the capacity to let you enter that new data. And so that'll all get into the database too. So thanks to all of the lakes that stuck with the program even during last year when we couldn't fully support it.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing too many questions here because you put a lot of information out there. That was probably more than a lot of people knew anyway. So, but I have a question. We had training yesterday, and I think it's exciting to know that there was a big turnout, wasn't there, Joe?
Yeah, I was amazed and so excited to see the turnout that we had. We had 160 people participate in the training yesterday. Normally when we do it in person, only 60 to 80 some folks can make the trip and be with us. So it was so great to see a lot of returning volunteers, but a whole lot of new faces too. At the beginning, we actually asked people whether they were new or experienced volunteers, and well over half of the volunteers were new to the program. So it was great to be able to meet with all of them yesterday.
Well, here's another question. It says, what does it mean to be an enrolled lake?
I can answer that one too. Ralph could too, of course, but when lakes that enroll, those are the lakes that have signed up for the program, and there are small fees involved with each of the parameters, usually about $30 per parameter. And so to be enrolled, you go through the enrollment process on the MiCorps.net website, and you can choose what parameters you want to monitor and pay those fees there. You'll also see access to all the training information. And you will also notice when you go into enrollment that if you're new to the program, there's a few parameters that are advanced, and those are limited to lakes that have a year of experience in the program. So if you're brand new, there's still a lot of things you can do, but there's just a couple that we hold off for our experienced volunteers.
Okay, I'm scrolling through, finish up the database. There, I do not see any more questions.
I saw
Here.
Mike, one more come in that asked if there will be another training session. No, we won't be repeating the training session, but we are going to post all the recordings from yesterday. And so we knew there were some people who weren't going to make it, or maybe just learned about it today after Ralph's great presentation. And so since we're doing everything online this year, training on your own by watching those recordings is also acceptable. So give us a week or so to get those videos edited for you, and we'll get them up on the MiCorps website, and you can learn what you need to know then, and then follow up with us with any questions you might have.
Yep, that sounds real good. Yep. Okay, well, without any more questions, Ralph, did you have anything else that you wanted to update people on, or Joe, or?
Yeah, I'll just make a final comment. So obviously, 47 years of history in this program. A lot of people were involved in making it such a success. And, we're real excited about the future of this program, especially with the funding in place, a new contract, and now the MSU team ready to take it on and really, really expand it and enhance it. So, kudos to them, and we look forward to a lot of good work.
Well, thank you, Ralph, for the presentation today and all you did in the past to make the program such a success. And I know that the group that's the MiCorps group right now will follow in your footsteps and do a good job. Okay, I'll check one more time for questions. Oh, well, someone said, thanks, Ralph, for the tutorial. I'll put it in my reference folder for sure. Okay, thanks again, Ralph. And oh, I wanted to let people know that I put the agenda on the top of the chat list so that you can click on that to find where the next session is, the links for the next 2 sessions that you have to choose from. One is from one of our board members, Mark Teicher, about homeowners insurance for people who live on lakes. And the other one is working within the watershed. So hope to see you there. Thanks again, Ralph. See you later, people.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Gene. Thanks, everybody else. I know.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Ralph, you've inspired me to get a hat like that.